I'm gonna go from the strategic plan to the student achievement presentation, if that's okay. I really don't have anything new to report for the strategic plan. I reported to you guys in June, and we have met all of our goals. The only thing we have lingering out there is working with Linkit. For me to be able to pull the data in terms of how long students have been in our district. So that is something that we're still working on them for me to be able to do. But other than that, we met all of our other goals for the strategic plan. So you guys got this presentation last week. So I'll do things a little bit different. Hopefully you had time to look it over. Usually I go through every single slide, like a pretty much in-depth review of the data. But since you've had it for a while, I'll be a little bit more brief with each of the slides and the data, and then ask any questions that you have. So I have a theme tonight, which is pretty much like I'm really happy to report the data that I'm reporting to you, and it's in a positive direction, and there's been a lot of growth, and there's definitely been some places where we've met that we haven't met before. So it's really exciting to come to you with this information. I'm going to be reporting now on the NJSLA results for the 23-24 school year for both ELA and math and science, all three, ELA, math, and science, as well as our fall iReady data for reading and mathematics. This chart actually just came out from the state for our state performance reports. All the places that is highlighted is where we met proficiency for language arts. So we met proficiency across the district. At Ritter, for all of our students, our Hispanic students, white students, economically disadvantaged students, and at Mainford for our Black and African American students, as well as our Hispanic students. Before we had no yellow highlighted up there that we met for ELA proficiency. For our ELA growth, it's easier to tell you where we didn't meet, but we actually exceeded some of the growth expectations. So for 8 out of 14 of the subgroups, we exceeded the growth expectations, and we met in 6 out of 14 subgroups. There was only 2 subgroups that we did not meet for ELA growth at Mainford, and that was economically disadvantaged and students with disabilities. For the first time, I think ever, since I've been standing up here to give this presentation to you, majority of our students are now falling in that meeting bar, that light green bar meeting. Years past, I was showing you that it was approaching. It was the orange bar that was higher. And right now, across the board at all the grade levels, the percentages for students meeting proficiency on the ELA and JSLA are falling in that meeting category. This is us compared to the state. At the meeting level, we outperformed the state in grades 5 and 6. And we are comparable with just a few percentages off in grades 3 and 4. For our racial subgroups, all of them also have the highest bar with the percentage of students in that meeting area. This is for the last 3 years for our subgroups for race. And you can see the percentage of students meeting proficiency on NJSLA really increased this past year across the board. Our Black students, Hispanic students, multiple races, and our white students, every single one of them showed a giant increase with meeting proficiency on NJSLA ELA. Same for our female students and our male students. There is that trend, that increasing trend every single year for the last 3 years, with a big change for this year. And in looking at our program populations, if you'll notice, it's the first time ever we've had free and reduced lunch kids meet proficiency on the NJSLA. That's why there's no other bars. So for the last 2 years, there was no free and reduced lunch students meeting proficiency. Our 504 students, there's a big increase in the percentage of students being proficient. There was also an increase in the number of students that have a 504 plan. So we did go from 29 students last year having a 504 plan to 42 students this past year. So it's an increase of 13 students in that subcategory. Also, in special ed, you'll see 2 years ago, there wasn't anybody there. And now we have 15% of the special ed students that scored proficient on the NJSLA, and then our gen ed population after that. This is each grade level for the last 5 years, but I take a look at it a little bit differently, and I like to look at the cohorts of students. So that's kind of why here, if you follow these arrows back, this 6th grade group are the current 7th graders at Delphi. So they were with us last year, and when they started with us in 3rd grade, their growth went from 35% reading proficiency, and then in 4th grade, 37, in 5th grade, 44, and by the time they left us in 6th grade, 60% of them were reading proficiency on the NJSLA. And then if you look at the sun here and follow that backwards, the sun is our current 6th graders, so they were in 5th grade last year. In 3rd grade, they went from 25% proficient to 37% proficient to 53% proficient. I also have the triangle, which would be the current 5th graders, which was last year's 4th graders, so you could look and see how that cohort of students is growing over time. In grades 3 through 5, this is the subtest data for the last 5 years for NJSLA. We improved in all subtests for reading, writing, informational texts, and then conventions was still our weakest area in writing. And we surpassed our proficiency rates from 17, 18 in vocabulary. And that's a really big success for us because vocabulary has always been an area of focus. 6th grade is reported separately only because 6th grade is considered to be middle school. If you take a look at the 6th grade, they had tremendous growth. I am so excited about their data. They made significant progress in all subtests except for the vocabulary subtest. They surpassed proficiency levels from the 17-18 school year in all subtests except for vocabulary, but they're only 2% away from being back to where we were prior to COVID. So some key takeaways from NJSLA: majority of the students being in that median level, improved in all subtest areas in reading and writing. In vocabulary, we surpassed our pre-COVID proficiencies. Consistent growth across all subgroups for students meeting and exceeding on NJSLA. Our 5-year trend data, our 3rd and 4th grade is still an area of focus to have more students meeting proficiency. 5th and 6th grade has made major improvements and is trending upwards. And 6th grade has had tremendous growth in informational, literary text, and writing as well. I'm not going to read every single one of these, but digging deeper into the data and looking at the evidence statements, we can dive into the types of questions where students did really well and the types of questions where we need to focus and even go as far into some of the standards. So for each of the grade levels, we have celebrations on where they did well, and we have focus areas. And this is all going out to the staff as well for presentations at faculty meetings, and we're talking about where would we put these types of things in the curriculum, and how are we, especially for the focus areas, how are we making sure that we are spending more time in these areas, and why do we think that we're not doing it as well. In math, you'll notice there's not as much highlighting in the math proficiency. There's only one subgroup for the district level that met math proficiency expectations for the state, and that is 2 or more races. And when you look at our math growth, this has always been our history. We grow a lot in math. We grow a lot across the board. Every subtest area except for 2 at Main Road, the same 2 as ELA, are economically disadvantaged, and our special ed students. If you are to take a look at the light green and the dark green together, the percentages will be higher than looking at the approaching, which is that orange category. So the majority of our students falling in that orange category, which you saw when you've seen in our iReady data in the past, being that one level below. When you're comparing us to the state, we are pretty comparable across all grade levels exactly with the state. We outperformed the state in grades 5 and 6. And we were off within a couple percentages in grades 3 and 4. So for our racial subgroups, there was a dip in the percentage of students, Black and African American, that met and exceeded on the state test. Hispanic had a little dip. Our multiple races and our white students had an increase. Female versus male, not female versus male, but female and male still has a steady increase for the last 3 years, both there. And again, free and reduced lunch for the first time, having 24% of our free and reduced lunch students meeting on the NJSLA. This 504 students, a big jump there. Special ed is back on the board, and our gen ed population showing an increase as well. For math, this is the same idea as it was for ELA. Following, this is the current 7th graders where they were in 6th grade. In 3rd grade, they started at 37% of them being proficient. In 4th grade, it was up to 38. In 5th grade, it was 33. In 6th grade was 42% of them when they left us. And then the sun would be the current 6th graders. And when they started, they were at 33%, and 4th grade went to 43%, and in 5th grade went back down to 39%. This is the subtest data, so for grade 6, grades 3 through 5, sorry. We increased in all of the subtest areas except for modeling and application. And we surpassed proficiency levels for the 17-18 school year in additional and supporting content and expressing mathematical reasoning, and our major content area is on an upward trajectory. For grade 6, we increased or remained relatively the same in additional supporting, major content, modeling, and application, and we had a little decrease in expressing mathematical reasoning. Here, all of our takeaways from NJSLA and our celebrations, digging deep into the standards, where did we do well in NJSLA, what the 5-year trend looks at, as well as the focus areas, basically being more in math, the type of questions that are being asked. The type 2 and type 3 are your open-ended type questions where they are actually having to write to explain their thinking and how they solved problems. In science, you will see here that majority of our students fell within the near proficiency, that yellow bar, which has been historically about where we've been. And when you look at us compared to the state, say the majority of the students in the state at the bottom, we're in the yellow as well. I always like to point out that our red is lower than the state's red, so that's always a good thing. And by race, for the last 3 years, our Hispanic students, multiple races, and white students have kind of been up and down for the last 3 years with the science assessment. Female and male, the last 4 years are there for you to take a look at. And then for the first time again, our free and reduced lunch students, there were 16% of them that scored proficient. Special ed, we've been relatively the same, around that 9%, and gen ed hovers for the last 2 years around the 30%. This is 5th grade for the last 4 years with science, where we've hovered, it's minus 3 years ago, where we've been hovering around 25% of the students being proficient. Taking a look at the subtest areas, we have significantly increased in all subtests over the last 3 years. Our strongest subtests are critiquing practices, earth and space science, sense-making practices, and physical science. Our areas of focus are investigating practices and life science. Our key takeaways, this is just summarizing everything that I just told you. And we're going to move to iReady reading for the fall. This is our district compared to New Jersey, which is right next to us. Here's us, circled. Here's the state of New Jersey. Here's the national, all the students in the nation that took the iReady assessment, and then the national norms from fall 22 and 23. We have less students at the 2 or more grade levels below than they do at the state or in the nation. And we're pretty similar when it comes to the early mid-on grade level as well as 1 grade level below. And then this is us the last 3 years. I circled the 1 for this year, and we're relatively Every fall, we kind of start off in the same exact place where we were, as well as the state. This is proficiency on the NJSLA. So according to iReady, the projected proficiency right now, based on our scores, if our students all met their typical growth, then we would look at like this purple percentages. That would be the percentages that we're looking at for students to be proficient on NJSLA for language arts. This next chart is if all the students met their stretch growth, then this is the projected proficiency, looking at that darker purple at the top. For ELA, it covers between 50% and 70% of the students, depending on the grade level, being proficient on NJSLA. iReady Math, this is the same thing. I circled us in comparison to the state and the nation and the national norm. Again, we have less red, so we have less students in two or more grade levels below, and we're relatively close to them with the one grade level below as well as early on and mid or above. This is us. We've been relatively stable each fall, the percentage of kids falling in each of these categories. And then here, again, projected proficiency for the NJSLA if the students only met their typical growth. So you can see we're definitely lower than we were in ELA. And if our students are to meet their stretch growth in iReady, this is what we could expect. Now, they will give us projected proficiencies after our students take the winter test as well. And I always report these out to you just so that we can compare later, was the projected proficiency correct on exactly where we were when the scores come out. Plans for improvement. So across the district, building fluency, accuracy, and automaticity in lower grade levels. Increased focus on comprehension strategies for informational text. Math, incorporating consistent opportunities for students to respond in writing to mathematical reasoning type tasks during math instruction. ELA, adapting written communication in response to varying demands of task, audience, purpose, and discipline. A cross-curricular goal is building strong content knowledge and connecting ideas across the disciplines using a variety of resources and media, mostly through writing. And we've implementation of intervention rooms for ELA and math in grades 1 through 6 now. The number of students that were starting the year in each tier, and these are even the students that entered our district, that transferred into the district, or have transferred into the district since school started. We're constantly updating these because we test them as soon as they come in to see what tier that they need to go in. So these numbers are updated as of yesterday. This is for ELA, and the number of students for tier 2 and tier 3 for math. And the last thing I have for you is our district goal, and this is on the board agenda for approval tonight as well. So the admin team got together, and we want to use iReady, and we want to use our stretch growth. And we weren't really liking the way that the goal was worded before, where it was like 70% of the population each had to meet in the tier. So there was like 2 separate goals within the goal. And we felt like if we just did it by the tier, that would be much more clear. So if I'm looking at reading, we're looking at the goals are here in the blue. So tier 1, 52% of the students would meet their stretch growth. In tier 2, we're looking at 48% of the students. And in tier 3, we're looking at 37% of the students. We started this goal in 2021. So our baseline data is here. I mean, we've come a long way with what we're expecting and what we're pushing for our students to meet their stretch growth. And in math, it's the same idea. So our tier 1 students were looking at 47%, 44%, and 35%. We took what they actually met in the spring for 23 and 24, and we added 5% to that as our goal. The reason we added the 5% is because when we looked at the last couple of years, the average, if you're averaging all of our tiers together, they were making 4%. So we chose 5% for each of the tiers. That's all I have. Questions?
I have questions first.
I have a quick one. Can I go first?
Yeah.
About how many students is 1%? Generally, I know there are varies per grade, but like if we made, 1% or 2%, about how many generally?
Do you mean 1% of the total population?
Yeah, like per grade.
First grade, we're talking about
65.
so it's about five.
I was just curious. Okay, thank you.
So we have no K kids in tiers yet.
Not yet.
Okay, so they'll be added, I guess, in winter.
They're actually testing now, so they'll be added in December. But we already do have BSI support in there that we haven't had in the past
Right.
from the beginning,
Okay.
that are already supporting the teachers being in classes and have kind of already
Figured out something, gotcha.
yes.
I guess my question for the goal is, obviously with the tiers, you're gonna have kids going in and out. Tier 1, they go to tier 2, maybe they go up to tier 3, then they go back down to tier 2. How are you assessing this goal when the tiers themselves are fluid? You're not gonna have the same kid, some kids, you're
Right.
not gonna have them in tier 2 all year or tier 3 all year.
So the way we do this goal is we pull the tiers from iReady. It's not the tiers that we create. So how we've always done this goal, iReady will tier the kids based on where they placed in the fall.
So what would be, like, how low is a tier 2, how low is a tier 3?
So our tier 2 kids are the early on grade level and the one level below.
Okay.
Tier 3 kids are 2 grade levels below or 3 or more. So I might as well just say 2 or more grade levels below or the tier 3.
Okay, so this doesn't coincide to the tier numbers that you just showed us in terms of who's
Correct.
inside.
They did not.
These are completely, these could, well, I mean, I'm sure they overlap.
They do overlap some, but there's more in tier 2 according to iReady
Then,
than what we have, because that big chunk of kids is in that 1 grade level below.
okay,
So there's definitely a lot more in the tier 2 range than there is when I'm giving you the tiered numbers. Because we use multiple sets of data when we're tiering.
okay. And what's the math, I mean, obviously our math scores are, our progress there isn't what we want it to be. Do we have a math program, are we utilizing one?
Yeah, we're using classroom math through Curriculum Associates.
And how long have we had that program?
We started it when COVID hit. The first year of it was the year that COVID hit, the same when we did benchmark workshop.
Okay. And can you explain the intervention rooms, how they're run?
Yeah.
That we're implementing, because I know that's part of CUSAC as well.
Yes. So it's different in first. Do you want me to start at the lower or at the upper? Because we've been doing them at the upper longer.
I mean, yeah, just give us an idea of like how, because obviously we're looking for different things to be happening so that we're seeing more growth and whatever it may be. So what, if you want to concisely tell us like how these rooms may be different than a regular, or other first grade room, it's not an intervention room.
Okay. So in grades 2 through 6, we have intervention rooms for math and ELA, where all the tier 2 kids, I'm going to say, most of the grade levels, all tier 2 kids come out of their classroom and go with a BSI teacher for the entire math block or the entire ELA block.
And that's our tier 2s, not.
That's our tier 2s. So the numbers that I gave you on the charts.
Okay.
And all of the tier 3 students leave and go with, in Jamir and Maynard, it's the reading specialist. And at Ritter, it's one of our ELA coaches that went back into the classroom, does our tier 3 students for ELA. So that it's almost like that pull-out replacement classroom. So they are with the intervention teacher for all of ELA and all of math. Each of those, the math period is run very differently than what you would see in the tier 1 classroom. They have a strategy-based lesson based on a class goal that is by the data. What does everybody in the class need? They have the standards-based lesson, so they're not missing out on the grade level standard. And then they have goal groups, and that's based on their individual goals. In ELA, it's a little different because we have reading, writing, phonics, and word study to do with that. So we have different resources that we're using. but we're always looking to bridge where they need to go. So there's a class goal, there's individual goals, and then there's the standards for that grade level, that lesson.
So if these kids are being pulled out from their entire ELA lesson, is that lesson they're receiving in the tier group a mirror of what is happening in the classroom?
It is, might not be the same resource, but it is the same standards.
So then my question would be, how are they assessed if they're, because basically they're being taught by a different teacher with different materials in a different way, maybe the same standard, so are their assessments the same?
Their unit assessments, their summative assessments are the same. They have progress monitoring, where we're monitoring them. When they're looking like they are ready to bridge over to the tier 1, then we start a transition with them to be able to go to tier 1. Now in math, we've given a lot of professional development to the math teachers, especially over at Ritter, because a lot of the kids are coming out of the intervention groups. So the classroom teachers needed to know the type of vocabulary, what kinds of strategies were they using that were making them successful. And so that way they have more tools in their toolkit as well. If they have a student that's coming in and might need a little bit of support, and it can be explained in a different way. Now in first grade, we're doing where the intervention teacher is pushing into the classroom for the entire ELA. So it's a co-teaching model, almost like a special ed ICS class. So the BSI teacher comes in for the whole ELA block, a BSI teacher comes in for the whole math block. And because we found with first grade, obviously the foundational skills, there's not much of a gap compared to where they should have been in kindergarten. We start to see that gap get bigger in second grade. So in first grade, we wanted to keep them together. So we rostered the tier 2 and tier 3 kids in 2 classrooms in first grade, and it's a push-in model. There are times where the tier 3 teacher takes the tier 3 kids out when needed, and they go back and forth.
So they're homogeneously grouped then for those classes?
Yes, for those classes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Thank you, Jeannie. I appreciate it. There are board members' questions, presentations. And those board goals that you presented are the ones that you're requesting to adopt.
Yes, they're on the curriculum